Okay, and we're going to get started. The first person that we have today is my colleague here at the Idaho State Tax Commission. It's Janet Rostock. She is with our Taxpayer Services Group, and they get questions from across the spectrum. So I will go ahead and turn it over to her.
Welcome. Good morning. And we are going to spend a little bit of time with the Idaho withholdings. We do get withholding permits, and withholding questions are a very large percentage of the calls that we get through the tax commission. So there are quite a few questions with it. And as Celeste said, if you have questions as we go ahead and write them in the chat. Just make sure that you put it to all participants, and that way everybody can see it. So let's go ahead and get going with the withholding. Some of the things we'll cover today is first and foremost, what's the difference between an employee and an independent contractor? I think a lot of folks would like to pay people as independent contractors, but there is a clear definition between the two. So we'll cover that. We'll cover registering for a withholding permit and who do we need to withhold from, on what wages, income do we need to withhold from, and how do I file and pay the Idaho Tax Commission. So who needs a withholding permit? If you have one or more full-time employees working in Idaho, let's say if you, a good summation of that is, are you going to issue someone a W-2? Yes, you're going to. Or if you're an out-of-state company, you have Idaho residents come into your state to work. Do you have to withhold from them, or out of a courtesy are we going to withhold for them? Because they are going to have to file in Idaho. All right, so basically the difference between employees and independent contractors. Do they set their own hours, or do they work 8 to 5 for you? Do they put in 40 hours, or do they possibly put in 20 and move on to another job? Is it ongoing, or is it something they're going to come in and do one job for you? And are they paid by you hourly, weekly, monthly, reimbursed for business expenses? And do they use employer provided facilities and tools, resources? Do they have their own tools, facilities? We all see out there at some construction sites where they have the brought in temporary facilities, and those would definitely be contractors. Do they work for one firm, or can they work for several at one time? Do they render their services personally, or can they subcontract them out? Regular reports are required, not required to account for their actions. Unless, of course, they're just not quite providing those services, and then they become accountable. Doesn't solicit for work, and they solicit for work through advertising. No risk of loss or opportunity for profit. And a contractor, independent contractor, definitely has a risk of loss or an opportunity for profit. Can we discharge an employee? Certainly we can discharge an employee. Can we discharge a contractor? Well, for a breach of contract, yes, we can. An employee can quit, and a contractor's obligated to complete that contract and or be responsible for not completing that contract. So there are some very concrete definitions between the two, so be real careful to find that first before you determine somebody to be an independent contractor. And make sure you have these. The first thing you want to do if you're a new business coming into Idaho, or you're in Idaho and decide to start up a business, a lot of these will pertain for any of your permits. So just make sure and register and name your business with the Secretary of State, and it's giving you a site there. You want to have an EIN. Do you have to have an EIN? You hear a lot of times you don't have to. For a withholding account, you do have to, and that's a federal regulation, and Idaho follows behind. For a withholding account, you do have to have an EIN if you're going to have employees. And then once you have those two things done, you can apply for your withholding permit. All of these are sites that you can go to accomplish these. Once you have your permit, and Idaho has started a new process that when they do send you your permit, they also send you the paperwork and the instructions for you to set up a TAP account. And a TAP account is just your online access for reporting and paying. You'll notice with these websites that are given to you or these links, every one of them say .gov. And I will just point out to make sure and stay when you go do these, you're new to things, you have questions, you want to stay on a .gov because there's all sorts of things people out there that'll help you, that'll fill these things out for you, that'll expedite them, and they'll charge you. All of these things that we've just gone through are free, and they're user friendly enough that you can sit down and do them. And even if you have a third party accountant doing them for you, you need to stay on the .gov sites. Very important, especially with the IRS.gov. Okay, so you've done the Secretary of State, you've done the EIN, and now you're going to do what we call an Idaho Business Registration. You'll hear it referred to as an IBR if you call in. Did you fill out your IBR? That just means, did you fill out your registration? And to do that, you would want to go to, and there's actually many ways to go in. This form is owned by the Department of Labor. However, if you call in with us, we try right from the beginning to get you familiar with and comfortable with using our tax.idaho.gov website, okay? Because there's multiple unlimited resources for you as a business owner on our website. So we're going to say we go to tax.idaho.gov/IBR, and it brings you to this page. And if you'll notice, the little green box that's circled says Idaho Business Registration Application. And you will go in and fill this out for any of your permits. This permit, as I said, is owned by Department of Labor, so it will actually go through all three agencies to get all of your permits. This is the one application that you need to fill out for your unemployment, anything related to work comp, and then your withholding permit. It's an important form. All right. Okay, so when you choose the Idaho Business Registration application, this is the front page that it will take you to. You'll see these two boxes, and the top one, it is a little bit of a lengthy form. So there's going to be times where you get into and you create an account and you think, oh, I'm going to go to lunch, or oh, I've got to go get this information. You can go back in and out of the application as many times as you need to until you submit it. All of the instructions here are going to tell you what you need. I would say grab a cup of coffee, grab a soda, I maybe grab a Red Bull, I don't know, and sit down and fill this out. Once you hit submit on this, it becomes a read only. So just keep that in mind from when you're inside of your application and you hit submit. It's not the end of the world because it can process through, and anybody in any agency that needs additional information can contact you. But you are going to start with the one on the bottom. Create a new account. Okay, so you filled out your business registration and you hit submit. That does take a good solid, like I said, it processes through three agencies, and it is what you need. You'll be good with the Department of Labor, Industrial Commission, and us. And so once you do, like I said, once you get your permit, it takes, we say it takes a good solid 10, and it, like this time of year when it's real busy, it can take upwards of 10 to 15 days to process that all the way through. But when we do send your permit, We will also, Idaho, the state of Idaho has gone, or the tax commission, I should say, has gone paperless this year. So you will be required to file, report, and pay online. Not to say that you can't mail in, but we are encouraging 99.9% for people to get their TAP account and register. So your next step after you get your permits is a TAP registration. There is a same day access. So let's say you already have your seller's permit and you've been in business for about a year and now you're doing real well and you've put on some employees. So on your registration, you said, I just want to add additional accounts. You can get same day access into your TAP account. Um, if you're already an established business, but we must have had one report, one return on file. And I believe with the new permits, you don't have to do the same day access. You would say that you already have a registration code. But if we have same day access, you need your recent return. A sole individual or a sole prop is going to use their social security or an ITIN, and businesses, and where we're talking withholding today, you're going to be a business, so you're going to use your EIN and your business name. Okay, so the things you can do in TAP is you can file your withholding report, sales and use, travel convention, auditorium, beer tax, wine tax, and your IFTA reports. A lot of those might not mean anything to you. You don't need them, but also you can pay withholding, sales and use, travel convention, and auditorium, beer, wine, tax, IFTA, and you'll see individual income tax and business income tax. The difference there being is you can pay for your individual or your business income tax on your TAP account. You cannot file your individual income tax or your business income tax on your TAP account. You can, there is access and resources on our website for you to access software that allows you to e-file those returns, but you cannot file them on your individual TAP account. A lot of the perks, a lot of the advantages to having your own TAP account is you can schedule payments out. You can view your history, and I think this is the biggest one that I try to encourage folks is if you have your own, you can always pay and do things outside of a TAP account, but the good thing about the TAP account is you can always see your history. You can see what you've submitted. You can change, if you have a pending submission, you can change it instead of just hitting the submit and off it goes. Get your due date reminders. They're the majority of the communications between the tax commission and you as a taxpayer are going to be online through email, or you can get your messages through email. We do send a couple of days ahead of time, hey, time to file. So you just have a lot more control over your permits and your accounts when you have your TAP account. You can pay. A lot of the bigger companies will file their reports, but they need to send in a check from, say, corporate or whatever. So you can send in a check. My recommendation, whenever you can, and it short of just because of what I've seen, is wherever you can keep your payment and your report together, it's better, just that it flows better. You can change your mailing address. You aren't able to change your location address, but you can cancel your permit, and then too, you can renew your IFTA license on a TAP account. What you cannot do in TAP is file your income tax returns, which I already touched on, and apply for a permit. this is a big one because we'll get calls where a lot of folks will say, I'm in there trying to get into my TAP account and I can't get in and it's telling me it doesn't match and now it's kicked me out. What we find a lot of times is people have skipped the business registration step. They're thinking that they're going to get their permit by going in as a new user on our website. So you cannot apply for that permit. You have to have that permit through the registration form. And then once you have your permit is when you sign up for TAP. And you can also not amend a permit return online. We are working on possibly sales and use, but right now when we need to amend our permitted taxes, you do need to call in and we need to get you some paper reports but I can tell you for any of this stuff, you can call in and there are any number of people that are more than happy to walk you through what you need to do to get it done. Okay, so as far as becoming an employer, there's a lot of the paperwork is federal paperwork, and so you'll see a lot of this comes off the federal site, but it is necessary, and I believe that some of it will be touched on by some of the other agencies, but know that you always have to have the I-9 form to hire an employee, and it gives you the website for that. W-4 forms now, they've actually created federal and state. Right now, I believe we do have access for the federal on our website. I don't know if that's a permanent thing there or, but you do need to have them fill out one for federal and one for Idaho. And even if they're the same, even if they say, oh, well, they're the same, still have them fill out one for Idaho and one for federal. And there's the clip of our website where it does show the Idaho W-4 and the federal W-4. All of your forms that you're going to need, be it federal or be it state, are very easily accessed, and the state forms are easily accessed just from our website. You've got one whole link that says forms and guides, so give a call in if you don't know what form it is or you're not sure, but you do have access to those on our site. And there's just a copy of the Idaho W-4 and the required lines in there and what needs filled out. Okay, and this I'm sure will be talked about by the Department of Labor, is you have to report to the Department of Labor within 20 days of hiring. And I don't speak a ton to federal because we aren't as familiar with it as we are with the state, but your federal withholding income tax is based on your W-4 payroll taxes and half from the employee, half from you. And I think that's a lot of the reason why everybody wants to fit into independent contractor, but just be real careful of that. I don't know a lot about the federal, and usually paid every month or 2 weeks in the year-end reconciliation. And again, I'm not going to dig too deep into the federal. You've got your Social Security and your Medicare, and there's a chart here that gives you a little bit. This is a better understanding of what's actually owed. This is your federal. For employees, the state withholdings are separate. You'll just send in the state withholdings. Well, besides the federal income tax withholding, you've got your Social Security and your Medicare, and those are the ones that you pay both for the employer and the employee. And we're back to the W-4 state income tax and Department of Labor state unemployment. You send that through, that'll be worked through the Department of Labor. We do get quite a few calls in where people are wanting to pay them together, and you have to kind of guide that into being two separate agencies and two separate reports. Okay, so who do you have to withhold from in Idaho or withhold Idaho income tax for? Well, you have to withhold for all full or part-time employees working in Idaho. You have to withhold for Idaho residents. If you're an Idaho employer and you have a non-Idaho resident come in and they make over, I believe it's $1,000, you have to withhold from them. Family members, those who work only one day in Idaho, uh, say you've got concerts coming in, football games, any of those kind of things coming in, they have to report for Idaho as well. Non-U.S. citizens, unless they're exempt from federal withholding. And if you have employees exempt from federal withholding, they'll have their federal forms to give you as well. And who don't you have to withhold for? Idaho, an employee who isn't an Idaho resident and earns less than $1,000. So before where I said if you have somebody come into Idaho, if you pay them more than $1,000 in Idaho, you have to withhold. And here where it says if they earn less than that $1,000. An agricultural labor who earns less than $1,000 in a calendar year. An employee is exempt from federal withholding. We talked about that a little bit. An employee is, and if you'll notice that all is bold. So it isn't just one of, it's all of the following are criteria. They're an enrolled member of federally recognized American Indian tribe, and they earn the income on a reservation, or they live on a reservation. I put the word or in there a couple of times. Please disregard that because it has to be all of them. And if they're an enrolled member of a federally recognized tribe, then they will have their tribal card that has their membership number. And who don't you have to withhold from? An employee gives you the Idaho form declaring they're exempt, but keep in mind if they do that, they need to give you a new Idaho W-4 each year if they're claiming exempt. If you find they claimed exempt and then they owed some withholding or they owed some tax to Idaho, just make sure you have a current Idaho W-4 each year by February 15th if we're claiming exempt. And income that you must withhold on is going to be your wages. That's pretty common, right? Um, wages paid in kind. And what does that mean? Wages you pay employees in something other than money. We've kind of heard that. We pay their lodging, we pay their food. I know there's a place I drive by that for a while I could tell one of the developers in the valley had a house where, oh my gosh, there were 10 or more trucks there every day. And I thought, well, that's an example. I hadn't really thought about it of a company paying their lodging. They had all of their contractors living. There was a lot of them living there. And so if you're providing for food, clothing, services, personal use of a company vehicle, must withhold on a fair market value. So if maybe they were saying, okay, we're going to charge you $300 a month rent or $500 a month rent, but we're going to pay that if, living in this home. So that would be claimed as wages, and would be taxable according to the employer tax guide. And food or lodging provided for your convenience is going to be an exception. We have some of our leadership that, maybe once a month or whatever, they show up with these awesome blue sky bagels. Well, those aren't going to be taxed to any of the employees. That's a move that you make, just showing your appreciation, and or if you make them work overtime for a week solid and you provide pizza. Those kind of things are not going to be taxable to the employee. Supplemental wages are going to apply. The Idaho income tax applies if the employee earned it while working in Idaho. Bonuses, commissions, overtime pay. I know there's some updates to the overtime pay, payments for accumulated sick leave, severance pay, awards or prizes, back pay, retroactive, and other similar payments. Calculating Idaho income tax. I so much make a point of, when I am training new hire representatives that answer the phone, is we have on our website, you can withhold at a wage bracket method or a percentage method. It's up, that's between you and an employee, or you and your, just the way you decide to do it. I would recommend very strongly to pick a method and move on it. There is a way of computing it, and there's the link there to go into that. There's so many variables when it comes to their W-4s that I wouldn't go so far as to say this is how much I'm going to withhold, because there are going to be variables. I know on mine we found that I pretty much break even if I claim married zero, and I'll withhold an extra. Well, that was once my husband retired, and I'll withhold an additional $10 a pay period, and then we break pretty even. So it works out. So it really is up to the employee to watch that and watch that pay stub, and then know, well, maybe I need to up my withholding amount, or they're claiming too many dependents or whatever. So reporting your Idaho income tax, you're going to report when you get an Idaho withholding account. They're going to assign you to either be monthly, quarterly, generally not annually. You don't see that a whole lot. But however, and again, you've gotten your TAP account, okay? So very easy to report. But Form 910, you're just going to report and pay what you have withheld, say for a quarter. A lot of people will get assigned quarterly and they get paid every other week or whatever. So they try sending those payments in every other week. Yes, you can do that, but I can guarantee you that well, I won't guarantee, I'll say it's very common that it becomes a reconciliation issue. If you're assigned quarterly, I would keep it as an accrual and send it in quarterly, and just know that's how you pay your withholdings. And I'm assuming the federal is a lot the same way. I don't know if the federal might not be a little bit harder to get through to help with reconciliations at the end of the year. But even if anytime you have any active permit with Idaho, be it withholding or any other permit, if it is active, even if you don't withhold anything, you still need to report zero for that return. Okay. Always, otherwise the system automatically says, oh, they didn't file. Instead of assuming you didn't have any, it assumes you did not file. So it will assess an estimate for you. If you get a letter with that estimate on it, please call in and let somebody help you get it squared away. Okay, Idaho reporting periods. Again, you're going to be assigned to be either monthly or quarterly. Always monthly. If you're assigned monthly, your report is due on the 20th, by the 20th of the following month. January's is due the 20th of February, etc. Quarterly is going to be due, if you're assigned quarterly, the end of your quarter is March, June, September, and December. So let's say the end of the first quarter is March 31st. Your payment for that first quarter is going to be due by the last day of April. Okay, always the last day of the month after the quarter ends. And even if there's no withholding, please report your zeros. Okay, so you've got quite a few of these outside of tap account resources, but where we are focusing, where you're going to focus in tap, you want, once you've created your tap account, if you go, and I would suggest definitely bookmarking these sites. You'll get your notice and and say if you have a third party doing your reporting for you, still create your tap account, bookmark it, and monitor it. And then you know that your reports are getting filed and everything's good. So if you go to the tax.idaho.gov, go to tap, and where it says log in, your username and password, and this is where it brings you to. Okay, so if you have, and then this account has a sales and use count as well. You see your withholding account, and then you see your file and view returns. It's just so easy. You're gonna love the idea that you went to go online. So if you click on that file and view returns, and you happen to have uh, December 31st, and this one is, and I'll show you a couple of things here. December 31st, 9/10 report is your quarterly or income tax withheld, right? So you're going to hit File Now, and gives you a little bit of instruction. Make sure here's what you're going to need, and you've got all of that ready to go. And I tried to hit Next at the bottom. Okay, so the next screen it takes you to, here's your options for your 910. This is how easy this is report and pay. And remember where I said, if you have report zero, if you have zeros, make sure and report it. So you have the option to report zeros or report and pay. It's going to ask you for the amount, how much you withheld, and you're going to put that in there. You're going to hit next, and it's going to confirm, and you hit next again. And here's where you're going to pay. Are you going to pay with your bank account, debit or credit card, or pay later? This is one of the places I say if you hit pay later, it's going to give you a voucher to send in a check. A lot of folks don't have an option to that, so it's not a huge deal. I would say pay it while you're sitting there so you don't, miss it or forget it. So if you're going in to pay for it, it's asking you how much you're going to pay, confirm it, and you can actually say you go in on and here's too where you could do your biweekly or whatever. You can go in and hit your amount to pay, confirm your amount, and payment date you can always set for your due date. So then those can then automatically pull over on that due date. I would say if you're wanting to pay it on payday, this is the way to do it. Set your payment date at the due date. Direct debit and save for future use. Up to you, entirely up to you. We do have a secure website, so if you don't want to have to enter in your banking information every time, save it, and you have a default payment channel. Okay. Okay, just more of your payment information. And there you go. You're going to say, yep, this is what I want to pay, and I'm going to confirm it, and you'll hit submit. And I would say all of those steps took you less than 5 minutes, especially if you have it set up as a default. It will give you a confirmation page. We've had a few people call and say, hey, I didn't get an email. I would always print this confirmation out. You should get an email at almost the same time, and I'm not sure why that would be, that some wouldn't get that unless they just have set up a different email in their account. But I would always print this out, and then just like the next day go in, you can see all of your stuff in your TAP account, see that you filed your return, see that you paid for it, and you are set to go. So then you can go back to your returns. Now, the one thing that we saw when we went in to file and view returns, your 910s are filed through the year. Those are more your most important return for withholdings for reconciliation is your end of the year 967. That's where you're going to send in your state copies of your W-2s that you issued, and you're going to file it after you're all done with your 910 payments, your monthly, quarterly withholding payments. Then at the end of the year, you're going to file your 967. And if you have, let's see, I probably should add this. If you have more than 10 W-2s, you're required to upload those in an electronic file. If you have under 10, you can do a paper form and mail it in, or you can even enter them manually online through your TAP account. And less than 10, I mean, you can manually enter 1,000 if you want, but that's going to be a lot of sit down, enter information. But here's your W-2s. You've got your information. It is highlighted there. Those are the amounts that it's going to ask you for. Okay, so we went back out to the screen where it says file and view. And if you remember, when we went into file and view, we saw 2 for December. Okay, the first one we went into, you filed view submission. The second one is your 967. Okay, if you are going to do it manually, you would click on the file now. If you have enough that you're going to upload them electronically, then here is your upload to an electronic file for W-2s. And again, this can be done either way. It can become a chore if you're trying to manually enter quite a few W-2s. A lot of folks do it. They don't care for the electronic process, but once you've done the electronic process a time or two, you're on a roll. So you look at it and decide. 967, this is, you're going to get this a lot in TAP. No, I don't need to change my address. And 1099s, this is a question that comes up a lot. They're only asking you for 1099s with Idaho withholdings. Okay, your 1099s for all your contractors are handled with a different process, but this particular function for 967s is asking you, do you have 1099s with Idaho withholdings? No, I don't. Those generally are from companies that are sending out, oh, say Percy. We all get Percy, or, not all of us, but some of us get Percy. And if they do withholdings, well, Percy comes out on a W-2, so that's wrong as well. You don't see a lot of 1099s with Idaho withholdings on them, but they are generally retirements and kind of thing. Okay, here's your manual entry to a W-2. So when I said, if you have 10, 15, 20 of them, not a huge deal. Again, get your cup of coffee, get your cup of tea, get your monster drink or whatever, and you can sit down and enter these in. If you add a W-2, this is the information it's going to ask you for. And again, see, the only ones required are these little asterisks, but there's, other things will come up, but it will be a chore if you try to do too many of them, but you can add just as many as you want to keep adding. What you're going to do is you're going to have your report where if you get an error that something doesn't match it, you've got all your reconciliation points. You hit your next, and it tells you what those are. That is actually your 967 getting ready to form up there. It's got to match up. Hit submit or confirm it. And there you go. You always want to remember your feedback opportunity about just how good we are here at the Tax Commission, because we are good. We we work really, really hard at trying to help you guys work through a lot of these things. So just a summary, check your employee versus independent contractor. This is important, and it can get you into trouble if you just don't. Somebody's coming into the company and your first question, okay, are they going to be an employee or a contractor? Get your withholding account. Have your employees fill out the required paperwork. There's going to be different channels besides tax commission is not going to follow up on your I-9s. They're not going to follow up on your W-4s. Any information that the Department of Labor shares with you, those are going to be things that they probably follow up on. So you just really need to know what kind of paperwork you need. Keep up on your Idaho Form 910s. Again, even if they're zero, keep them up. Submit your 967. That's your big reconciliation, is your 967. For your record keeping for payroll, you're going to keep at least 4 years. Records are going to include name, address, social security number, I-10, dates of their employment, wages and taxes withheld, hours and work locations, and copies of those forms to verify and back up that you actually collected that required information. And again, tax.idaho.gov is always going to be invaluable resource for you as far as being a business owner, whether you've got 2 or 3 employees or whether you've got 200 or 300 employees. You have always got resources on our website. And again, there are several people who answer the phones and are there to help you with it. We put some sales and use on here, helpful shortcuts on our website. I would definitely print these out and keep them there for for your questions or your help. And again, contact us. Always, and at this time of year, and you guys, some of you have maybe even tried to contact and said, "Oh, I just can't hold that long." There's, you can go online, you can contact us. If you hit the contact us, there's any number of resources that it's going to ask you the questions. It's going to give you where to go on the website, or you can submit a question. If I have a sales and use or a withholding, if you have a category here that you're able to click into, those are going to go to someone who is specifically able to answer that question. Down here, if you don't quite fit into it, in the bottom right, you've got other, that goes to a email box that there's probably, oh, if I'm not mistaken, there's about 3 or 4 people who are very diligently working on that email box. And you can always call. There's always the numbers there. There's it's a little small for me there. I'm having a hard time reading that, but if you want to call in to Boise, you've got your 208-334-7660. You've got a toll-free number and fax taxpayer services. I'm not real sure how many people use fax machines anymore, but hey, we've got them. Or you can always go to our website at thetax.idaho.gov. And we're always on the Facebook, Instagram. That LinkedIn is the middle one. YouTube. And what I would say about the YouTube, if you go onto our website, there are quite a few very short few-minute videos that are going to help walk you through some of your stuff as well. And on X. And I believe this is where I would probably hand it right back to Celeste. So thanks for sticking with me on that, and have a great day, you guys.
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started again. Next up is Trevor Nichols from the Industrial Commission, and he's going to be talking about workers' compensation law.
Good morning, everyone. Like Celeste said, my name is Trevor Nichols. I'm an investigator for the Employer Compliance Department of the Idaho Industrial Commission. The Industrial Commission, we're the state agency that is responsible for Idaho's work comp laws. So in this presentation, will be 4 parts. We'll be going over the Industrial Commission, the state agency here, workers' compensation insurance. So that'll be the first part. Second part will be the relevant laws that govern what we do, as well as some of our compliance processes. The third part will go over exemptions from coverage, and then we'll wrap up this presentation with misclassification, independent contractors versus employees. I appreciate that Janet went over a lot of that because we use a lot of the same guidelines when it comes to classifying workers as independent contractors or employees. And if anyone has any questions or comments, I know there's a section at the end that says it's for questions, but please feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer them to the best of my ability. So, workers' compensation insurance law. So, the Industrial Commission, we're the state agency, like I said, that is responsible for administering Idaho's workers' compensation insurance law. We monitor and audit claims of injured workers. We conduct judicial proceedings over disputed claims. What's not mentioned here is we also maintain a work comp policy database. So, every business that operates in Idaho with employees should have a work comp policy that's filed by the insurance company on file with our office. So I guess, you can see that down there in the employer compliance box. So we work to ensure coverage is secured to cover every employee. So when claims come in, there's a policy to file the claim against. This helps protect the employee and also the business. I try to tell folks, we're not out to get you. We're not just on the employee side. We're looking out for the business's best interests as well. So workers' compensation is a type of insurance. It's a no-fault insurance, which provides wage loss and medical benefits to workers with a job-related injury or disease, and protects employers from certain civil liabilities. Now, the next question a lot of people will ask me is like, well, does my business or my employee really need to have this type of insurance? So this answers that question. All employers with 1 or more full-time, part-time, seasonal, or occasional employees are required to maintain a policy unless specifically exempted by our state laws. So a lot of times people will say, oh, I only have a part-time employee, or we're a seasonal business. How can you expect me to have this coverage? I tell folks, like, you can have an employee for 10 minutes working on Idaho soil, and there has to be a work comp policy for that full 10 minutes to cover them for you to be in compliance with our laws. So invalid agreements, sometimes some employers think they can get out of having to cover their employees by having their workers waive their right to coverage. There is no way you can have an employee waive their right to coverage or a business waive their responsibility to cover the employees. The requirements are written into our laws here. So here are the relevant parts of the workers' compensation law that we deal with every day. So 72,209 and 211, exclusiveness of employees' remedy. So the only remedy to being civilly liable for a work-related injury is having workers' compensation insurance. And then excludes injuries caused by willful or unprovoked physical aggression from employers. So if your boss attacks you, it's technically not a work-related injury that falls under work comp. 72-301, employers can satisfy the insurance requirement in one of two ways. They can obtain a work comp policy from an authorized insurance carrier in Idaho, or they can become self-insured. This is a little more rare, but employers that have a lot of payroll in the state. So think of, I'm trying to think here, St. Al's Hospital. They have millions in payroll in Idaho. They're big enough to where they went through the Industrial Commission to become self-insured. 72-319 goes over the penalty for failure to secure workers' compensation for employers. So failure to comply with the law is a misdemeanor, penalty of $2 per employee per day, or $25 per day, whichever is greater. So, I mean, a little math, it's 12 or less, you're paying $25 a day, or 13 and up, you're going to be paying $2 per employee. Notice of security, so 72-311, all policies are to be filed with the Industrial Commission. We have very specific filing requirements. And then all policy cancellations must be filed with the Industrial Commission, I believe within 30 days of the policy being canceled by the employer or the insurance company. So coverage options, insurance costs, it's based on your payroll or the amount of payroll, and also calculated with the type of work your business is doing. So somebody working from home is going to probably be cheaper than somebody working scooping ice cream at an ice cream shop. And that's probably going to be cheaper than somebody working on the power lines. So you can see the calculation down there. We'll go too in depth on that. So who offers workers' compensation, insurance in the state of Idaho? So there are private insurance companies. So over 300 carriers are licensed to provide workers' compensation insurance in Idaho. You can contact those insurance companies through an insurance agent, a local insurance agent, usually in Idaho. Then there's also the Idaho State Insurance Fund. They have an office located here in Boise, Idaho. I think they're on State Street, but you can also call in or email in as well. They provide most of the work comp coverage for local small businesses, I find. And then finally, there is the assigned risk pool. So this is for our employers who may be deemed high risk employers. If they get denied coverage from private insurance companies and the state insurance fund, I believe with 2 denials, they can work with an insurance agent to get into this assigned risk pool. It is a little bit more expensive than these other avenues, but if you're having difficulty getting coverage, every employer should be able to get coverage if they need to have it. So this next part's pretty interesting. It's Title 72-212. It's our exemptions from workers' compensation coverage. So you'll see the obvious ones here. Owners of the business. So that'd be LLC members, members of a partnership, sole proprietors, corporate officers. They have to at least own 10% of the stock if there is publicly traded stock. And if there's a board of directors for the corporation, they have to be on that board. Some of the lesser known exemptions from coverage include household domestic workers, so like stay-at-home nannies or aides, casual employment, so somebody coming to mow your lawn. Employment of outworkers we don't see too often. I won't go into that. Voluntary ski patrol, and then officials of athletic contests, I believe for private high schools. And there are other exemptions as well if you want to dig into Idaho Code 72-212. So we're flying through here. So if you guys need me to slow down, just let me know. But this next part is independent contractor or employee misclassification. So whether someone who works for you as an employee or an independent contractor is an important decision. Though it might be tempting to save some money by classifying workers as independent contractors, misclassification can have serious financial and legal consequences. So an independent contractor is a person who provides goods or services to another entity under terms specified in a contract. Generally speaking, independent contractors retain control over their schedules, the numbers of hours worked, job accepted, job's performance, and how the job is ultimately completed. Employees usually work at the schedule required by their employer, and their performance is usually directly supervised by their employer. So, what I do is a lot of times I utilize what's called the right to control test. This test was basically built by relevant case law that's already been decided in the Idaho Supreme Courts. There are four factors of this test. We'll go into that. So, the first part of the test is direct evidence of right to control. So, really, the whole point of the test is to determine if there is an employer-employee relationship. And a lot of times, there is an employer-employee relationship if the business can control the worker's work. So, first, we're looking at direct evidence of right to control. So, like I was saying, if the business is setting schedule or hours that the worker has to show up and when they can go home, there's evidence of right to control. If the business is giving direction to the worker on how they do their job, there is evidence of control. Secondly, there's method of payment. So if the worker is paid on a regular cadence, so let's say they are an hourly worker and they're paid weekly or bi-weekly, that is also indicative of an employer-employee relationship. Typically, independent contractors are paid either upfront or at the job's completion at irregular time points. Then we have furnishing major items of equipment. So if the business is providing the worker with tools and equipment that is necessary to do the work, or they're providing them with materials to do the work, there could be evidence of a right to control. And then finally, right to terminate relationship without liability. So Janet was going over that. Employees can be fired or they can quit at any time. Contractor, they have to complete the contract or they could be liable. And what isn't mentioned here too, what I typically look at is if the worker's work is integral to the function of the business. I had one guy who was doing running a poop scooping business, going around people's lawns here in the Treasure Valley, cleaning up the lawns after dog poop. And he would hire workers to go scoop for him. These workers were, he would try to say they were independent contractors, but their work was pretty integral to the function of his business. Without people going and doing the scooping, his business wouldn't function, is what I ended up telling him. And so based on that, I told him, like, hey, these guys are your employees and we got to have workers' compensation insurance for them. So some other quick facts. So a 1099 with the IRS, that's tax form, it's not by itself an indication of an independent contractor. We don't solely go off of that. That could be part of the evidence that may say someone's an independent contractor, but it doesn't solely decide that. We have no certificates of exemption in Idaho. So sometimes subcontractors will request to have a certificate saying, hey, my business doesn't have employees, I'm exempt from work comp. We don't provide those. Our exemptions are all written into law. Statutory employers, so there is a statutory employer law that states that if a subcontractor were to hire a worker and the sub doesn't have work comp and that worker were to get hurt, it wouldn't necessarily fall on the subcontractor. That injured worker could go up the chain and go after the general contractor for benefits. A lot of times, the insurance providers for general contractors will require that all their subs, whether they have employees or not, have their own separate work comp policies. The cost of no insurance. In Idaho, there's no public safety net for insured employees of uninsured employers. Without insurance, the injured worker's recourse is against the uninsured employer personally, so they'd be civilly liable in that case. So this chart kind of goes over the costs of misclassification. So you can see here, this is the total cost of the injury claim So with a policy, the premium that the employer may pay is probably going to be around that $3,600 mark. Without coverage, though, it goes up 230%. So this is just for a crushed foot. You can see here it's even crazier for a knee strain, where again, with a work comp policy, the premium you're paying as an employer is probably going to be around $3,700. Without that, that goes up 3,500%, and you're paying around $130,000. And that's calculated with penalties from the state as well as paying out to the injured worker. Well, I don't think I got any questions during the presentation. If anyone has any questions, now would be a good time. If not, thank you for listening.
Trevor, this is Gretchen. I do have a question.
Go for it. Yeah.
So about how many claims do you guys process? I don't know, in a year, month? I mean, do you guys, how busy are you guys?
Well, I wish I had that answer, Gretchen. I apologize. I work specifically in the employer compliance department, so that'd probably be more a question for our benefits and claims team. I'm actually going to sit with them here in a little bit. I'm sure they get quite a bit, especially I've noticed since I started working at the Industrial Commission, the amount of businesses and workers coming into the state, it has absolutely skyrocketed since COVID. So
Okay, good to
we
know.
have definitely gotten a lot busier in the 5 years I've been working here. Typically, I do get some cases where there is a case where an injured worker files what's called a first report of injury form, and there's no workers' compensation insurance. So I may get 4 or 5 of those a year. How does a new employer submit a workers' compensation policy? Gretchen, before I answer that next question, did that answer your question?
Yeah. I was curious. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So how a new employer submits work comp coverage? That's a great question. I get it all the time. So the Industrial Commission, we only accept work comp policy reporting from the insurance carrier. They would submit that policy to us via an online database called NCCI. It stands for the National Council on Compensation Insurance. So we get updates from this NCCI database every single day, and our system's designed to kind of scrape their database and download their policies into our system. So we do it every day. It gets updated every day. So that's a lot of work, maintaining that database and making sure policies are matched up with the correct corresponding employer. I think I saw another question there. It might have disappeared off that screen. Celeste, do you have that last one?
Yeah, actually, it looks like he went ahead and entered it again. It says, are there any new updates to workers' compensation law or policies in Idaho for 2026?
That's a great question. As far as I know, no. I mean, there's some stuff I've heard that's rumored to go through the state house, but I'm not aware of any changes that have been put into law as of this moment. Great questions, everyone. Does anyone have any other questions? Is it true it's best to have workers' comp insurance prior to employees? I didn't get the rest of that question. It may be easier to get the policy maybe a week or a few days before your first employee starts working. It's always better to maybe have more coverage than less coverage, I tell folks. But we understand the realities of being a business owner. It can be difficult to juggle everything. So I tell people we're not out to get you. So if there is maybe a few days lapse in coverage, we're happy to resolve that with you. Really, the most important thing is getting the policy. What maybe before you have somebody start working, but if it's a few days after, probably not great, but at the end of the day, it's better than not getting the coverage at all. Great question.
Thank you very much, Trevor. So I think that we will go ahead and continue. And next up is going to be Gretchen. Gretchen, if you cannot control them, just go ahead and tell me and I will advance them for you.
Okay, I will. Thanks, everybody. My name is Gretchen Fontaine. I do work for the Idaho Department of Labor. Thank you, Janet, for your presentation. I actually learned quite a bit myself through that, so thank you. And again, Trevor, thanks for yours as well. Workman's comp is something that we do, that the Department of Labor deal with on occasion, so that was some good information. I only have a few slides to cover with you guys. I just wanted to touch base on a few things for those of you, from what I understand, are newer employers to Idaho, or just newer to being an employer in general. So I just wanted to touch base on a couple of things that is important for you guys to know. I'm also going to, once I'm done talking to everybody, I'm going to put in the chat. We've got 2 workshops coming up in the future, so you can make a note of that. And I also gave Celeste a handout to provide to you guys, as well as the slides at the end, so that it has some really good reference information so that you don't have to scramble while we're all talking to you guys about the different places to go. You'll have a handout that you can refer to later. Okay, Celeste, if you want to move to the next slide, I'd appreciate it. So SIDES is something we implemented about 10 years ago. And what it stands for, it's a state information data exchange system. The federal US Department of Labor have been encouraging states to do more stuff electronically. That's also happening within the state of Idaho. I think you guys have probably all heard about the paper reduction, and the more we can do electronically to save dollars, that's what the state wants us to do, as well as the federal government wants us to do. And so we are now involved in this exchange, and it really helps us to, it's a secure exchange, and it really does help us get information to our employers quickly when a claim for unemployment insurance has been filed. And it's also a mechanism for the employers to get the information back to us in a more timely manner versus having to do things through the mail, or in some cases, some of us still do have fax machines. Instead of doing it in that mechanism, that it's a secure, safe way to exchange information through a hub. Okay, so let's next slide. So basically, it's an online tool, like I just mentioned, for employers to quickly and accurately and securely respond to the state when we have a customer that comes in and files a claim, and we need information from you as the employer as to why the person is no longer working for you. Did they quit their job? Did you unfortunately have to fire them? Was it just a simple layoff situation? Was it a leave of absence situation? So we are required to notify employers, interested employers, when a customer does file a claim, so that we can get some information from you as to regards as to why this individual is no longer working. We also recently added the exchange for sending our determinations electronically. Again, as we move forward into the future, the goal is to do more and more of this communication with employers and also with claimants, doing more stuff electronically and not through the mail, using, stamps and postage and all that fun stuff. Okay, next slide, please. The registration to sign up for SIDES is on our website. The address is right there on this screen, but like I also mentioned, the handout that Celeste will be providing to all of you guys also has the link that you can go to sign up for SIDES. It's not a long process. Once you fill out the information about your name, your employer's name, the contact information, you will need to have both your federal identification number as well as your state identification number when you sign up. It will send us an electronic registration, and then we will make sure that all of your information is correctly in our system. We will also reach out to you and make sure that we have all the right contact information. And then from that point forward, you will receive any notifications that a claim's been filed electronically, and you will be notified via email in most cases that that claim has been filed. And like I said, it's a real easy process to sign up. So I would encourage you guys to do that. Again, it is unfortunately one more place, as you've been hearing, where you have to go and sign up for something, but you guys will be thankful that you're getting this information electronically in a timely manner versus having to wait for a piece of mail to come to your location. Okay, next slide, please, Celeste. I also just wanted to touch base too on our employer portal. I know Janet had mentioned before about registering as an employer, registering for your IBR. This is another location, the employer portal, where you will be logging in to report to the Department of Labor wages every quarter, as well as paying the tax. Hannah, who is our next presenter, she will be going into more detail in regards to some of those activities. But the employer portal is also a place that you will most likely log into on a pretty regular basis. It's a quick way to communicate with us. We also have a secure messaging system within that portal, so you are able to effectively communicate with us electronically there for all kinds of things. It can be tax related for the tax side, wage reporting for the tax side, but also in regards to unemployment insurance and how we can serve you with questions when it comes to unemployment insurance or specific claims that have been filed. I also want to highlight, Janet did mention this in her report as well about reporting the new hire. This is something that is important for employers to understand how critical this information is for us in unemployment insurance, because claimants sometimes will be filing for unemployment and collecting their weekly benefit amount, and then they do get hired. And oftentimes, unfortunately, they don't stop filing when they get hired into a full-time job. And oftentimes we won't know that they were hired into a new job until wages get reported into the next quarter. So it could be in some cases 6 months before we would know that an individual worked for a particular employer. So if by reporting new hires when they are hired, that information comes into us, we cross-match that with claims that are possibly active and currently filing, and then we can make sure that that individual knows that we know they've been hired. We do send them a notification when that new hire comes in if they have an active claim, and it's a really effective way for us to prevent customers collecting benefits that they're not entitled to once they've been hired. Okay, next slide, please, Celeste.
Before you go on, Gretchen, we have a
Sure.
question. It says, I'm an employer in Oregon and I have one fully remote employee. Would unemployment claims be to Idaho or Oregon?
Oh, good question. It depends on where the wages are reported. Wages need to be reported in the state in which they are earned. Hannah can correct me if I'm wrong when it comes to there being maybe a special circumstance where telework is concerned. That is not my area of expertise, but typically unemployment claims are filed in the state where the wages are earned. So if that individual is in fact working in the state of Idaho, even though the employer may be located in Oregon or whatever, a different state, those wages should be reported to the state of Idaho. Therefore, the claim would be in the state of Idaho. Good question. That's also a confusing question for claimants and employers alike, is a customer may have wages in several states, and it doesn't matter where you reside, it matters where those wage credits were earned. And so in situations where we have wages in multiple states, the customer will have to decide which state they want to file in, and then all of those wages will be merged into that claim in whichever state that that individual files in. And here in Idaho, we do tend to encourage those individuals that have wages in Oregon, Washington, kind of in our border states to file in those states because they do actually pay a higher weekly benefit amount in those states than here in Idaho. Is that the only question? I can't see the chat, so I wasn't sure if there is.
No, the only thing that they added was that they are reported in Idaho. When you're talking about it, depends on where they're reported.
Got you. Okay, so then yes, they would need to file here in Idaho. Even if they physically move to another location, they would need to have they would file their claim here in Idaho. Good question. Okay, next slide, please. This is just a screenshot of what the employer portal looks like. So when you guys go to when you click on that link from our website to register in the portal, this is what it looks like. So you know that you're in the right spot. Again, as a new user, if you have not registered before, it'll walk you through the steps of what we need from you in order to have access to the employer portal. Okay, next slide, please. So then I just wanted to briefly touch on a couple of things. I know that the majority of these presentations have been geared towards employees, the things that you need in order to make sure that your taxes for the are paid correctly on your employees. Obviously, you need to have workman's comp if you have employees. But I felt it was important that I touch base a little bit on what we need from you as an employer. Again, we need you to respond, whether it's electronically through our sides response that I mentioned. Once you're registered, all of our communication where claims are concerned will be going through that sides portal, basically. Or if we do send you a paper notification, we do appreciate responses back from employers with the information on that document or in that side's response. Try to fill it out as completely as possible. That really does help us understand why the person is coming in and filing a claim now. If you do, unfortunately, have to discharge somebody, employers are the moving party from the Department of Labor looking at the issue as to why the individual was let go. The burden does fall on you as the employer to provide us with information as to why they had to be let go. And there are really two key factors that we look at in order to determine an individual's eligibility for unemployment. We look at, why did you decide that day? What happened that day that rose to the level of needing to fire this individual? It could be something as simple as they're just not a good fit. It could be something egregious, like you caught them stealing from you, or they unfortunately misbehaved on a job site and used foul language. But we need to know and understand why that particular day was picked. Sometimes it's just the simple answer, it was the end of the pay period, and we knew that they weren't going to be a good fit for our business. And if there is misconduct, then we have to look at the three things that we consider and when we're adjudicating discharge issues to determine if a person can collect their benefits. We have to look at what misconduct, what did they do that caused them to get fired? Willful disregard for you as the employer, your best interest, a deliberate violation of a reasonable rule, a disregard for standard of behavior that every employer has the right to expect. And we talk about this in our workshops, which I mentioned we're going to have 2 coming up, which I'll make sure that information gets into the chat. We go into this in a lot more detail. And employers are constantly asking us what they can do so that if they do fire somebody and they do file a claim, that we will deny benefits and not allow benefits. And again, the most important thing you can do is keep good records. Make sure that if you do decide to fire somebody for misconduct, that we have to look at it from the misconduct point of view. If it simply was something where the employee just was not a good fit for your business because they just weren't able to do the job they were hired to do, we would not consider that to be misconduct unless they were doing something intentional. We would just look at that as it just wasn't a good fit, and most of the time in those cases they will be allowed their benefits, because we really have to focus on the misconduct piece of why somebody is let go. If the individual files their claim because they quit their job, then we focus our attention with the claimant and determine why they had no choice but to quit working for you, and the burden is on them to provide us with the proof that they had a good reason to quit that job. One of the most common ones that we will see with a quit is an individual gets hurt on the job, or they have another kind of sickness or illness that impedes them from being able to do that type of work. And oftentimes those end up resulting in us allowing their benefits, because most individuals can't control a medical situation which doesn't allow them to do that particular job anymore. And that's all I have, unless anybody has any other questions for me. Hey, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Great. Thanks a lot, Gretchen. So I'll keep an eye here on questions if they happen to pop up. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and move on to Hannah's presentation. Hannah Dawson is also with the Department of Labor, and she is going to talk about unemployment insurance tax basics.
Okay.
think I got it. Good morning, everybody. I know you guys have heard a lot of information today, and a lot of it is new to me as well. It's been super useful hearing everything about state tax and the Industrial Commission. Everything sort of lines up with us too. So I'm right there with you guys learning information as well. But I did want to go over some stuff with UI tax. This is going to be specific to your unemployment tax. Idaho Department of Labor is the only agency that reviews this. I know that withholding has a lot of other information for tax. We're just unemployment over here. So I first wanted to go over what exactly even is unemployment insurance. I'm sure a lot of you guys know this information already, but it's still useful to know. So this is a payroll tax that you guys as employers pay into. It results in a trust fund that we ultimately use to have unemployment benefits paid out to workers who file for an unemployment benefit claim. And if we decide through that adjudication process, like Gretchen was talking about, that they are allowed to receive unemployment benefits, we use that trust fund to pay those benefits out. This is meant to be a temporary situation for them. Obviously, we want all of those separated workers to get back into the workforce. So this fund is there and available for them to use during that time. And just to show it a little bit more clearly, I love a flow chart. So we have employer contributions, that's you guys paying into that unemployment tax trust fund. That fund grows the more you pay into it. And then unfortunately, job loss occurs, whether this is through a casual situation, if there is like a discharge or a quit or just a layoff, or sometimes big things happen like a pandemic. Ultimately, the result is we have unemployment benefit claims that are filed. And again, if that adjudication process determines that the worker is allowed to receive those benefits, that fund now shrinks. But since it's a temporary thing, now they're getting back to work. During that time while they're filing their claim, they're looking for work and trying to get back into the market. And then once they're hired back on by new employers, those employers get to pay into the fund again with those contributions. So it's a lovely, lovely cycle. So who is required to contribute? The first type of employer making up the majority of our employers, cleverly titled, is just our general employers. So these are going to be anything from like your food service industries, retail, construction. The majority of you guys are going to be making up this category. In order for us to determine whether or not you meet coverage, though, for that general employment type, we need to know if you pay a minimum of $1,500 in wages in a calendar quarter, or you pay one or more employee for some portion of 20 different weeks in the current or preceding year. So usually it's that wage threshold of the $1,500 that makes you eligible for coverage. All of this is determined through the Idaho Business Registration Form. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail here in a little bit. The next one that we would have are our agricultural employers. Their statute is a little bit different when we determine whether or not they meet coverage. Agricultural, so this one, again, cleverly titled, right? Types of work that these guys perform: livestock ranchers, produce farmers, feed production, things like that. It can get kind of hairy sometimes if you're like in the transportation aspect of moving agricultural goods. So it never hurts to give us a call if you're in that field and wanting a little bit more clarification to know how you would be recognized by the Department of Labor. Our agricultural employers, oops, I see a question here. Do past employers pay the unemployment, or does it come from a general fund? How do these claims affect the employer? That's a really great question. We are going to be going into that a little bit more in detail in a bit. But if it is the most, we review this based on how much in wages were paid to that worker to determine who is ultimately chargeable. And this side does kind of fall more with Gretchen. So now we'll do a little switch of if Gretchen needs to correct me at all, she's free to step in. But if we determine that whichever employer happened to have the most in wages paid to that worker, even if they are the past business, that's the one that's going to get charged. It can affect your unemployment tax rate. It does have a little bit of an effect of if you're an experience rated employer or a cost reimbursed employer. Again, we're going to get into that in a little bit. But usually that past employer, they've already paid. It's an insurance process, right? So you've already paid into it. We're paying out of the general fund. So it's not like you're going to get an immediate bill for however much you have to be paid or paying unless you're cost reimbursed. I don't know if that answered your question. So I'm going to keep, okay, awesome. So I'm going to keep going. So again, with our agricultural employers, their statutes are a little bit different. So remember the general employers, like the majority of you guys, we determined if you met coverage, if you paid $1,500 in wages. For agricultural employers, it's a lot higher. It's $20,000 or more in a calendar quarter. This is usually because agricultural employers, they're more based on a seasonal schedule. So you may not have employment during the entirety of the year. So it's really dependent on how many employees are you hiring and how much in wages are going out during those periods of high peak. And then again, for our general employers, we had one or more employees working some portion of 20 weeks. For agricultural employers, it's 10 or more employees for some portion of 20 different weeks. And then our last category is our domestic employers. I believe Trevor mentioned this a little bit. So these would be more like your housekeepers, your nannies, your caretakers. Generally, these businesses are recognized as sole proprietors, but they're bringing one individual coming into a domestic situation and doing a service there. The threshold coverage for these guys is a lot lower. We don't have a minimum employee basis for these guys. For them, it's just a monetary threshold, and for them, it's $1,000 even or more in a calendar quarter. You meet coverage, and you get an account with us for unemployment purposes. So who is reportable? We've got some common pitfalls that I specifically wanted to talk about for the unemployment tax sphere. The first one being our corporate officers. Now, if the business is an LLC, that's fine, that's great. This particular thing is independent of an LLC distinction. So if the IRS recognizes your entity as an S Corp or a C Corp, meaning you're filing with an 1120S or an 1120, then as a corporate officer, if the majority of your services are performed here in Idaho, you're an employee for Idaho statute, and your wages are also considered reportable to us. Now, this one does have a flyer. I've already sent it over to Celeste, so we'll make sure that that gets over to you guys as well, because that has a lot of really helpful information about more about what's reportable and the different types of things as a wage are reportable, things beyond just your traditional commissions or bonuses, things like that. It can also include whether or not the business is paying for any personal expenses like mortgage or groceries or anything like that, your car payment. That can also be considered a wage for corporate officer wage reporting. We do require that our corporate officers that they report a fair market wage. Obviously, there are instances where that is different to the reality of your situation. We just ask you to report as honestly and factually as possible. That just helps us a lot out. We do say that the corporate officers still need to report their wages because there are some cases where corporate officers can still be eligible for unemployment benefits. I get that question a lot. Why do I have to report into this? I'm not eligible for these things. Well, there are some circumstances where you are considered eligible. So if you happen to file an unemployment benefit claim, we would need to have your wages reported so that we could make a determination on how much in unemployment benefits you would be able to receive. If you ultimately decide, hey, you know what, I don't want to have to report my wages into the state, we do have an opt-out option. This opt-out feature does come with a form that you would have to submit to say, I'm not going to report to the state unemployment tax. I do want to let you know this can affect how much the entity pays towards your federal unemployment tax. So we always recommend that you talk to an accountant or bookkeeper or just anybody in that realm to kind of help you understand how it might impact your business specifically and your guys' finances specifically. If you did want to opt out, like I mentioned, we do have that form. That form would have to be submitted to the Department of Labor no later than March 31st for it to count for the current year. So obviously we're in May now, so we're past that March 31st deadline. If you already know that you haven't been opted out, your wages as a corporate officer will continue to be reportable through the entirety of 2026. However, you can still submit the opt-out form today, and you're exempted effective January 1st, 2027. And then we would be able to say you're no longer reportable to us as a corporate officer. If you decide to go that route and you opt out of having to report, you are locked in to that decision for a minimum of 2 years. You can't go back and forth between opting in and opting out. However, if you did want to opt back in after that minimum 2-year period, we do have another form for that that you would be able to submit also by that March 31st deadline for it to take effect for the current year. Okay, so this is something that both State Tax and Industrial Commission hit on. I'm glad they did, and I'm glad that I get to repeat it again for a third time for you guys, because this is something that the Idaho Department of Labor is also very, very interested in, and it's something that we review with employers on a daily basis, sometimes in a pleasant conversation where we're just providing some information about what it means to be an independent contractor or a covered employee. Sometimes we get alerted to individuals being brought into a business as a 1099 after they've already filed an unemployment benefit claim. And if that worker believes that they should have been recognized as a covered employee, then we also have to review that a little bit further and make the determination on what classification is most appropriate per statute. So for Department of Labor, there are 2 specific prongs that we really look at when we're determining. Everybody kind of has their own tests when they look at these things. We have these 2 prongs. They are both required to be met in order for us to determine whether or not a worker is an independent contractor, at least for Idaho Department of Labor. One of them being free from direction and control, and I'd also throw in there management. So, you know, even just the fact of, do they come in and sit in on meetings? Do they have to show up for an 8 to 5 type of schedule? Are they expected to be in certain places at certain times for job activities? These types of things can also fall under that control aspect here. They also have to be independently established in a trade or business. This doesn't necessarily mean that the independent contractor is required to have their own federal ID through the IRS. However, we would say that, are they able to market their skills to another employer while they're working for you or performing a job for you, including if that other employer happened to be a competitor of yours? Do they still have that, that freedom to be able to do that? And a lot of these other things we've already kind of talked about with the other agencies. I really liked when Trevor mentioned about integral. We look at that a lot as well. I had an example where a car salesman was trying to tell me that, or a manager of a used car facility was trying to tell me that his car salesmen were independent contractors. Again, though, if this is integral to your business, if this is what the business does, and you're bringing in people to perform that specific service, that's not going to look like an independent contractor in our eyes. That's going to look more towards being a covered employee. And when I do say covered employee, I mean those wages are reportable to us for tax. Other ones we've hit on already is the pay made on a regular schedule. Permanence as well is one that I'd like to touch on. So if they are coming in 8 to 5, Monday through Friday for months and months and months on end, that looks more like an employee to us versus whether or not a worker is coming in and performing services for one specific job and then boom, I'm out of there, goodbye. That looks more like an independent contractor. We do look at who does the training. So do you expect the independent contractor to come in and automatically know how to do their job and need little direction on how to do it? Or do you need to sit down and say, this is the software that we're using, this is how you use the copy machine, or however, whatever the case may be. Whose equipment is used, we've touched on that one a lot. And then again, does the worker have their own business? This one is a big one for us. Or are they at least able to market their services and skills to other businesses while they're still performing a job for you? And then do they represent the business who contracted them? So I like to think of this one as if they have to go out on the job and interact with the public, is it this independent contractor's business that's on the t-shirt logo, or is it your business that's on the logo? Whose company vehicle are they driving? If they're representing you guys, the employer, it looks a little bit more like a covered employee to us versus if they're representing themselves, then that looks more like an independent contractor. So once you determine whether or not you meet coverage and knowing what kind of wages are reportable, we've hinted at this one as well a couple of times, that Idaho business registration. There's another link right there in order to be able to get to it. As Janet said, there are a lot of ways to get to that Idaho business registration form. We have our own way as well, including from our landing page, which is just labor.idaho.gov. We have a whole big questionnaire that you would fill out in order for each agency to be able to determine what kind of coverage you meet or what kind of permits are required. For Idaho Department of Labor purposes, we are looking at number of employees, the estimated wages per quarter. That also helps us determine that do you meet coverage if you're a general ag or excuse me, or domestic employer. And then we also want to know ownership information, just in case we do have any questions and we need to reach out to you for further clarification. So, okay, now you have an account with us. We do send out a welcome packet. So if you don't get a welcome packet from us within 7 to 10 business days, I would recommend giving us a call. We can look and see if your registration has been snagged for further review. This could just be there was inconsistent information on that registration form that we needed a little bit more clarification on before we could fully process. This happens most often if there's been a business purchasing another business. That's always going to come with additional questions from us. So it's not that you've necessarily done anything wrong. It's just that we need more information so we know how to set your account up correctly with us. But once you do get that account number with us, ours is going to be unique from that withholding account number. Another thing for you to keep track of. How lovely, right? But once you do get that account, all of our reporting is done on a quarterly basis. There's no option to change that at all. It's always going to be quarterly. So in order to do that, this is how you would navigate to that employer portal. Gretchen had a screenshot of that in her presentation as well. You can get to it directly from labor.idaho.gov. We've got a lovely login button at the top, and you would just select to log into the employer portal, and it takes you over to that screen. I recommend bookmarking that because, like Gretchen mentioned, you're going to be in and out of there a lot for us. So for reporting, like I mentioned, this is done quarterly. And I believe, like Janet mentioned as well, this is going to be done the month following a completed quarter. So we just wrapped up quarter one about a month and a half ago now. All of quarter one's gross total wages per employee were reportable no later than April 30th. And all of the associated UI tax payments were also due by that day. So now we're here in quarter two. Quarter two wraps up in June. Everything will be due to us no later than July 31st for quarter two. And it follows like that for Q3 and Q4. We also have a paperless system. We require that you do this online, so that's how you would get there for that. And again, we're looking for your gross total wages, not net. We get that question a lot as well. It's always gross total per employee. Once you get into our employer portal system, the goal is that you see these 8 green tiles. Originally, when you log in, you might only see 3. Hopefully, when you click on the Add or Select Employer tile, the name of your business pops up and you're able to click on that and then get the whole world opened up to you with the 8 green tiles. The one that you would use for the UI tax reporting is this one here, UI tax reporting and payments. We're really great with naming. So we get this over here. This is the screen that you'd get bumped over to. I know it's kind of small on the screen, but this is just kind of a snapshot of how your account looks. I always recommend that employers, even if you have a third-party payroll doing all of this for you, I still recommend logging in and reviewing this information, especially this blue banner, because it is a live snapshot of how your account looks now, both with the account information, contact information, and then whether or not your business is considered open and active with us. If you have any balance or due, if you see this number in parentheses, congratulations, you have a credit and nothing is due. That's nice. But if it's just a standard number, that's your balance. And then it'll also tell you what quarters are available for reporting and what your UI tax rate is. When you click on the report next quarter, that's what that looks like down here. It'll take you over to where you can fill in that gross total information. Now, this is also similar to Idaho state tax. Even if you did not pay any wages in the quarter that we had just wrapped up, you still do need to file a zero wage return with us, because just like their system, ours is going to say or believe that the account is still open and that and it won't assume that there just were no wages. It'll assume that you just aren't reporting. So you do need to still file a zero wage return. This can get kind of tricky. If anybody ever has difficulty with that, feel free to give us a call. We can help navigate you on how to file a zero wage return with us. It's a little counterintuitive, but when you click on that report next quarter button, all of the fields need to be left completely blank. And if there's any pre-existing information in there, it needs to be removed before you can file a zero return. But once you get that report filed, again, since this blue banner is live, it'll immediately tell you whatever your balance is for your UI tax. And right underneath that report next quarter, you would be able to make that payment. And you can do that online, or if you wanted to print a voucher, that's also an option to you as well. And these other tiles, they're all super useful. Like Gretchen was talking about, we have our sides and e-response tile. If you recognize in your blue banner, hey, that's not my address anymore, you can update all of that information here. You've got UI benefit claim information on if you were the chargeable employer after a benefit claim was filed. We have our new hire reporting tile. This also is used, new hire reporting is also used to determine if there's anyone who's delinquent in child support. So not only is it really crucial for us to know if someone is filing for unemployment benefits and is simultaneously employed by an employer, it's also important for child support and making sure that health and welfare, they're able to kind of see this information as well and know if they need to take any action on their side. And then we have our secure messaging tile. If you ever have any questions or the hold line is too long, right now we're doing pretty good on not having huge wait times. But if you just needed to shoot off a question really quick, this is a great place to go. This is monitored all day. And we do answer questions from there all of the time from a whole host of things. And you can also get questions in. There's a benefits category in there too. So there's, this can be used for anything. If you have any documentation that you need to send to us, it can be sent through here as an attachment, because a lot of the documentation that we request ends up having sensitive information on it. So this is a really good way to get that information over to us in a secure way. So going back to that blue banner, we had our available quarters for reporting, and then we had whatever the UI tax rate was. So if you're an experience rated employer, and the majority of you probably are, this rate can change on an annual basis. So it can change based on a variety of different factors, but ultimately, since it's called experience rated, you do need to build up some experience with us as an employer here in Idaho. So as you're paying that percentage of the gross total wages and tax, all of our standard or new employers, they're automatically given a 1% rate. So if you had, you just do 1% of whatever the total gross wage is, that's your tax. If you're paying that on a regular basis and you're paying it timely, after enough history is built, we take a look at the account and determine whether or not, based on that history, your rate goes up or it goes down. There are limits to how far we can go in either direction. So these rates are recalculated on an annual basis. They are issued out in December for the following year. So your 2027 rates are going to come to you hopefully mid-December, based off of all of the history that you're building with us right now for 2026. One of the big things with an experience-rated employer, it isn't just paying those taxes on time. It can also be affected by however many unemployment benefit claims are filed against your business. So again, like we kind of referred to with the chargeable employer, whichever business paid the most in wages, traditionally that business is going to be considered chargeable. And the more chargeable benefit claims you have, there's a chance that your rate could increase just because it's all proportional, right? So if a business is paying or having more unemployment benefit claims filed against it, their rate is proportional to that. Versus if you don't have a lot of unemployment benefit claims filed against your business, your rate could decrease and go lower because you don't have as much responsibility for paying into the unemployment trust fund, right? Because that's for the benefits. So if you're not an experience-rated employer, you would be considered a cost-reimbursed employer. For rate determinations, you only get 1 or 2 here. So cost-reimbursed employers, this is specific to only certain types of businesses, specifically nonprofits, and even more specifically within that would be 501c3s. So again, this is all determined on how you're taxed and recognized by the IRS. But also if you're a government entity, a tribal entity, or school, these types of businesses would also be eligible to become cost reimbursed if they wanted to. These types of businesses do choose if they want to stay as experience rated or if they want to be cost reimbursed. Cost reimbursed essentially means that you only pay tax when an unemployment benefit claim has been filed and unemployment benefits have been issued to a separated worker. And for cost reimbursed, it is paid back to us dollar for dollar on how much in benefit claims we paid, our benefits we paid out to that separated worker. They can choose whether or not they want to be billed on a quarterly basis. So essentially, as the claim is being filed and benefits are being paid, they can pay it dollar for dollar that way, or they can pay in advance, and we do a reconciliation at the end of the year to determine whether or not they overpaid into the trust fund and they need a credit reissued to them, or if they end up needing to pay us back more. This is a question we get asked a lot of the time too. So how do I lower our rate? This is only going to be applicable to the experience rated employers, cost reimbursed, whatever they choose, whether they're billed quarterly or they're doing that advance, they're always going to be in a fixed rate, but experience rated, like I mentioned, they can kind of go up or down. These are some of the ways that we recommend following or just monitoring in order to have your tax rate with us lowered. The gist of it is just be in communication with us, whether that's making sure that your quarterly reports and taxes are filed and paid on time. If there has been a benefit claim, make sure you're responding to those questions in a good time frame, because that can impact whether or not benefits are ultimately paid or whether you're chargeable. And then if there's a situation where a determination is made for those benefit claims and you don't agree with it, you have the option to appeal, and sometimes that goes in your favor, and then benefits don't get paid, and that works to help lower your rates, right? And then if there's any fraud that you're aware of, that's one of those, just being in communication with us, let us know. And like I mentioned, calculations are done using how much in taxes are being paid against how much in benefits go out. So we want that balance to be right there in the middle on that teeter-totter and not weighed too heavily in either direction. And then just these helpful guides, you can find this at labor.idaho.gov/publications. We have a whole section in there called business information. Really, it's underneath the other guides or resources drop downs that I navigate employers to most often. As far as guides go, this first one, the unemployment insurance tax information, that can be found in our other guides. That's actually our handbook. Every time I get an opportunity to send this over to an employer, I usually do, just because it has a lot of great information, not just on when to report or like penalty information, what even is considered a wage. It has more information about independent contractors, lots of good stuff in there. 7 ways to lower your tax rate. So if I were to go back to this is actually its own little pamphlet. If you wanted to see the full breakdown of it, that can be found in our other guides. Like I mentioned, we have our flyer for corporate officer wage reporting, and we also have another flyer for independent contractors or employee for misclassification or classification of workers. That's also a handout that has been sent to Celeste, so that would get sent over to you as a handout. Has a lot of great tips on there. And if you're ever unsure on how to classify your worker, always feel free to give us a call. We'd rather help you now when you're making the decision rather than finding out later and having to work backwards. Because then if we work backwards, you guys owe more tax to us, right? That's not fun. So if you're never sure or not sure, feel free to give us a call. We can help point you in the right direction. Under our resources dropdown is where we have a lot of our forms. Those are those corporate officer exemption and reinstatement forms, depending on whether or not you want to pay into state unemployment tax or only pay towards the federal. We have our amended UI tax report form. This is one that I navigate people to all of the time because people will say, oh, I just filed my quarterly report and it's already been submitted and it's already been processed, but I just realized I made a mistake. I flip-flopped the wages for 2 of my workers. Well, no worries, we can fix that. That amended UI tax report is how we would go about doing that. And hopefully when we amend your wages, right, it results in a credit to you. So we have our UI tax refund request form there as well. If you find on that blue banner you have a credit and you want that to get sent back to you, we've got that form there. And then the last one is our employer portal authorization form. If somebody calls in from the business and we don't have them already listed as an authorized user on your account, our policy is we can't talk to them, not without talking to you guys, the business owners or managers, anybody else who is authorized on the account. So unless you're available to hop on the phone with us really quick and grant that authorization for so-and-so to be providing information or asking questions, this authorization form is a way to make sure that all of those new people that you hire to do bookkeeping or manager, whatever, if you want them to have access to your account, this would be the form that they would need to complete in order to do that. And all of those forms do have the instructions on how to return it back over to us. A lot of people send it through in that secure messaging tile in our employer portal feature, but if you did have a fax machine and wanted to send it that way, our fax number is there and our mailing address is also there too. So that is really all I had. That is the phone number for our tax team. So if you want more information on those slides that didn't quite work out today, or you have questions on anything else, you know, in 24 hours that you absolutely need to have answered now, that's the phone number to reach me or other people like me in our unit. This would just be the tax team. And like I said, right now, we haven't had a whole lot of wait time on our phones. Usually it's under 2 minutes. So we're all pretty friendly. We all like helping you guys out and making sure that you're squared away for UI tax reporting.
Great, thanks very much, Hannah. If anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and put those in the chat area. And if you don't, that's fine too. If you think of something, I'll keep the room open for just a couple more minutes. Oh, Janet, could you address amending withholding forms? Currently, it's a manual paper process.
To amend your quarterly or monthly, can you hear me good there? Okay. Call in, because we are trying to go paperless a lot. The only time we will have you by paper amend a 910 report is if you have overpaid and you're looking for that to be refunded back to you. But if we need payments moved, payments corrected around, we can help with a lot of that over the phone. But if you are looking for a refund, still call in and we'll get you the paper form and give you some instructions on how to amend.
And I want to thank everybody for being here today. And I know it's a lot to absorb, but we hope it's been helpful for you, and we'll talk to you soon.